A number sounds impressive right up until someone asks one question. Compared to how much of it exactly? Moringa leaf powder is often sold with a claim attached: 17 times the calcium of milk. It's a real number. It's also gram for dry gram, comparing a food with almost no water left in it to a food that's nearly 90% water. Once you correct for that, the 17 becomes something closer to 4. Still good. Not a miracle. That one correction is the whole story of this video. Here's what we're actually going to do. Take the plant protein claims everyone repeats, the seed that beats chicken, the algae NASA supposedly studied, the ancient grain an empire was allegedly built on, and check them the way a food scientist would, not the way a highlight reel would. Some claims survive, a few don't. And the food that comes out on top isn't the one with the flashiest stat. It's the one that's boring, cheap, and sitting in your pantry already. In 1971, a sociologist named Frances Moore Lappy published a best-selling book called Diet for a Small Planet. In it, she argued that because most individual plant foods are relatively low in 1 or 2 essential amino acids, vegetarians needed to strategically combine proteins at every meal. Rice with beans, that kind of pairing, or risk a deficiency. It was a well-intentioned claim. It was also wrong, and nutrition science figured that out decades ago. The body keeps a rotating pool of amino acids on hand. As long as someone eats a reasonably varied diet across the day, not even the same meal, the aminos even out. The American Heart Association itself walked back an old, more skeptical position and now states plainly that plant proteins can supply everything the body needs without deliberate combining. And yet, the complete protein framing never really went away. It just moved from Lappé's rice and beans advice into marketing copy. This seed is a complete protein. This grain is a complete protein, like it's a rare prize. It mostly isn't rare, and completeness was never actually the bottleneck science said it was. That's chapter 1 of tonight's real story. Not which foods have the most impressive sounding stat, but which ones actually hold up.
Chapter 1. The Habit of Comparing the Wrong Things. Moringa oleifera is a genuinely useful plant, a fast-growing tree native to parts of Africa and Asia that produces edible leaves packed with a real spread of vitamins, minerals, and a plant protein with a decent amino acid profile. None of that is in dispute. What's in dispute is the specific multiplier claims that follow Moringa around online. 17 times the calcium of milk, 25 times the iron of spinach, 7 times the vitamin C of oranges. Dietitians and food composition researchers who've traced these numbers back to their source find the same pattern every time. The Moringa side of the comparison is dried leaf powder, concentrated, almost all the water removed. The milk, spinach, or orange side of the comparison is the fresh, water-heavy version most people actually eat.
Dry a leafy vegetable down to powder, and nearly everything in it looks more concentrated per gram because you've removed the water that was diluting it. That's not fraud exactly, it's just an unfair fight. Fresh moringa leaves, measured against fresh oranges, come out almost identical in vitamin C, not 7 times higher. Corrected fairly, moringa is still a solid source of iron and calcium for a leafy green, genuinely better than most, just nowhere near the miracle tree numbers. The lesson isn't ignore moringa, it's this. Anytime a plant food's protein or nutrient stat sounds too dramatic, ask what it's being measured against and in what state. That one habit will save you from most of the exaggerated claims in this entire category. Moringa isn't the only food that gets this treatment. The exact same trick, concentrated powder versus watery whole food, shows up again with an even more famous plant protein. This one, at least, has real space agency research behind it.
Chapter 2. The Algae NASA Actually Studies. Spirulina is a blue-green algae that's roughly 55 to 65% protein by dry weight, with a full set of essential amino acids. That part of the popular claim checks out. What usually gets exaggerated is the framing that NASA studied it for space missions once, decades ago, as though it's settled history. It's not history, it's current. NASA and Japan's space agency, JAXA, have an active line of research into growing spirulina aboard the International Space Station right now, testing whether the algae can be cultured stably over 6-month stretches, because spaceflight radiation and microgravity can cause it to mutate. The appeal isn't just the protein. Spirulina also releases oxygen as it grows, which matters a great deal when you're sealed inside a metal can hundreds of miles above the atmosphere. So the honest version of this story is arguably more interesting than the exaggerated one. Spirulina isn't a nutrition fad NASA glanced at once. It's an active candidate ingredient in the literal life support systems being designed for future long-duration space missions. 3 tablespoons of the dried powder, the same concentrated form used in that research, delivers around 12 grams of protein for almost no calories. Chapter 3. The contenders that don't need a trick. Once the inflated comparisons are set aside, a smaller list remains. Foods that hold up to scrutiny using ordinary cooked, ordinary serving size numbers. No dry versus wet sleight of hand required. Lentils. A single cooked cup delivers close to 18 grams of protein, among the highest of any legume, alongside iron, folate, and one of the lowest glycemic indexes of any starchy food. They've been a staple across the Middle East, South Asia, and the Mediterranean for roughly 10,000 years, in large part because they store for years without refrigeration and cook faster than almost any other dried legume.
Chickpeas. About 15 grams of protein per cooked cup, with an archaeological record stretching back roughly 9,000 years in the Middle East. Research on regular chickpea consumption links it to better blood sugar management and improved gut microbiome diversity, largely from the fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Tofu, done right. Half a cup of firm tofu carries around 10 grams of complete protein. The reputation problem tofu has in American kitchens is almost never about the ingredient, it's about the preparation. Pressing the water out of firm tofu before cooking, even just wrapping it in a towel with something heavy on top for half an hour, is the difference between tofu that crisps properly and holds a sear and the waterlogged, flavorless version most people remember trying once and never again.
The American Heart Association's current position supports regular soy consumption as both safe and beneficial for cardiovascular health for most adults. None of these needed an inflated multiplier. They just needed a fair measurement. There's one more category worth a closer look because it isn't about raw protein grams at all. It's about what happens to a food after it's been fermented. And it turns out fermentation does something dry statistics can't capture. Chapter 4. What fermentation actually changes. Tempeh originated in Java, Indonesia, roughly 1,000 years ago, made by fermenting whole soybeans with a specific mold until they bind into a firm, dense cake. 3 ounces of cooked tempeh deliver about 17 grams of protein, comparable to a beef patty of the same size. But the more interesting change isn't the protein count. It's what fermentation does to the minerals already inside the soybean. Raw legumes contain compounds called phytates, which bind to minerals like iron and zinc and make some of them harder for the body to absorb. Fermentation breaks down a meaningful share of those phytates, which means the same soybean, after fermentation, gives up more of its own nutrition than it would raw. That's a real, mechanistic reason tempeh outperforms an unfermented soy product of the same size. Not a marketing multiplier, an actual chemical change. Seitan tells a different kind of story, one about who gets credited for an invention. Seitan is made from vital wheat gluten, wheat dough washed repeatedly until the starch rinses away and only the stretchy gluten protein remains. The earliest written reference to it appears in a Chinese agricultural text from the year 535, and the practice is widely credited to Buddhist monks in the 6th century, who needed a meat-like, protein-dense food that fit a strict vegetarian diet. 3 ounces of cooked seitan can deliver 20 to 25 grams of protein, more than most cuts of chicken or pork by the same weight. The one real caveat: it's pure gluten, so it's not an option for anyone with celiac disease or a serious gluten sensitivity. 1,500 years before a nutrition label existed, someone in a monastery kitchen had already solved the problem this entire video is built around.
Chapter 5. The Small Stuff That Adds Up Quietly. Not every entry needs an ancient backstory. Hemp seeds are about as unglamorous as plant protein gets. 3 tablespoons stirred into a smoothie deliver around 10 grams of protein, with all 9 essential amino acids in a ratio close to what the human body actually uses, plus an omega-3 to omega-6 fat ratio that research links to lower inflammation. They spent decades sidelined in the U.S. purely because of their association with marijuana, despite hemp seeds themselves containing no meaningful THC. That's a policy and perception problem, not a nutrition problem. And it's a useful reminder that a food's reputation and a food's actual nutrition are sometimes 2 completely separate things.
Chapter 6. Building an Honest Plate. Strip away the inflated multipliers and the countdown list drama, and the actual, defensible picture looks like this. Legumes, lentils, chickpeas, black beans are the cheapest, most evidence-backed everyday protein base available from a plant. Fermented and pressed soy foods, tempeh, and properly prepared tofu add meaningfully more per serving, along with better mineral absorption. Seitan is the outlier for raw protein density, with the gluten caveat attached. And there's no requirement to plan meals around complete proteins at all. That anxiety was debunked as a myth decades before most people watching this ever learned to worry about it.
The realistic takeaway isn't eat spirulina and moringa and never think about protein again. It's that a plate built mostly from lentils, chickpeas, tofu, and tempeh, eaten across a normal, varied week, comfortably meets what most adults need. No powder, no supplement, no 17 times anything required. The most useful skill in this whole conversation isn't knowing which plant has the most protein. It's knowing how to ask what a number is actually being measured against, because that one question is what separates a genuinely well-fed diet from a well-marketed one. If a specific plant protein claim has been nagging at you, something from a supplement label, a wellness account, or a friend's confident dinner table stat, put it in the comments. We'll fact-check the next batch the same way we just fact-checked this one, sources included. That's the real math behind plant protein. Less dramatic than the marketing, more solid than the skeptics give it credit for. If you want the next one delivered the same way, verified, not repeated, subscribe to Evergreen Garden. New documentary every week.